Speakers today, so we've got Paddie, Karen and Sam, who will be talking about patient user engagement. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Paddie, and yeah, thanks very much.
Hi everybody, I'm Paddie. I'm just trying to share my screen because I'm not a technical wizard here, but here we go. So actually it's Sue rather than Sam, but that's not a problem. I'll introduce the speakers as we go along. So this session is really about listening to the users for the technologies that people come to you with. Very often people materialize with a marvelous idea, which is technologically driven, based on an assessment of need that is, that comes down from Department of Health and is based on, global statistics for the incidence of diabetes, for instance. But actually, there's little consideration for the people who use it. And I think if we overlook that, we miss an opportunity for impact. And it's something that the AHSN is looking to develop at the moment. So for me, the listening to users actually answers another question, which is the so what? Quite regularly we get the, well, that's a marvelous piece of technology. So what use is it to me? And I think this session, what we want to do is to try and drill into how we answer that so what question. And there's one of those urban myths out there about a sales director who was recruited to Colgate toothpaste. And in his interview, he was very bullish and he said, in 3 years, I'm going to double the sales of Colgate. And they believed him and they gave him the job. And when he came to his review, they reviewed the figures, and actually he had nearly doubled the sales of Colgate over the period he'd been there. And they asked him how he did it, what was his marketing strategy? And he said, there was no marketing strategy. I just made the hole bigger. And that demonstrated a person who knew how his product was used. And by making the hole bigger, they used more stuff, so they bought more stuff. So something to bear in mind, that sometimes the answer to the problem is really quite a simple one. So today we've got me. I'm not going to talk for very long, which is unusual because I always talk a lot. We have Karen, who's a colleague of mine for many years, who's sort of my guru on market research, who's going to talk to us about how you ask questions, why it's important to ask questions. And then crucially, we have Sue. And Sue is a member of our citizen panel who reviews applications to the SME Innovation Fund. And she's going to talk to us about what it's like to be one of these citizens who engages both in research and in the innovation activities that we do here at the AHSN. What it's like to be a public contributor, why you do it, and some examples of where it's happened well and where it hasn't. So this is going to be a real whistle-stop tour about why we should ask the questions, who we should ask them of, and who our public contributors are. And then I'm going to use sort of a made-up example of how you would go about thinking about how you engage with the communities who are likely to use a particular type of project. And as I say, I'll make one up. And if appropriate, because I think we have some innovators on the call, if you'd like to start making a plan, we will. But if not, I think the getting it right session will be the interesting one. So that's it. We're going to get going because we are a bit behind time. So I'm going to invite Karen. I'm going to operate the technology. God help you. Karen's going to do the next session.
Right, please.
Why ask?
Okay, thanks, Paddie. As Paddie said, I'm a market researcher, so my company is Active Research. I have a sister company called Medical Device Market Research, which specialises specifically in medical devices. But under Active Research, for the last 20 odd years, I've been helping companies undertake research, pre and post-launch market research. So that's companies in the healthcare sector and the business-to-business sector. And it's been across the whole range of market research. So Paddie asked the first question of, so what? So I take that on to, why are we asking? What are we trying to find out from people? And how can that help us in the development of our product? The simple answer to the question, why ask, is really because you are not your customer. That's it in a nutshell. I could go now because that's it. Despite what we all think in terms of, we all might think we have the best empathic skills and we can understand what it's like to be a surgeon on the front line or a dentist or a diabetic if you're not a diabetic. You can't, because you don't do that day in, day out. For example, I'll give you an example. You might be an orthopedic surgeon and you've developed a new surgical instrument and you think it is the best thing ever and it's going to revolutionize some aspect of surgery that you undertake. And that's great. And you think, well, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, so I know what all orthopedic surgeons will think of this. That's not true, because if you've developed it, there's a good chance you might be working in a tertiary centre, a specialist centre. So you might be seeing a very different patient cohort to the patients being seen by an orthopaedic surgeon in a district general hospital. You may also have better access to diagnostic tests, scanning, imaging. You may have better access to rehab facilities. So actually, the environment you're working in is very, very different from the environment another person ostensibly doing the same role is working in. So that's the simple answer to why I asked. In terms of, what can we find out by doing market research? There are really, these are the real basics, but there are obviously lots more things that, lots of the bigger companies do. But the basic ones are really looking into your market for your product, the product itself, how you communicate about it, what the price issues are, what the barriers are to purchase, and then more importantly these days, the post-marketing surveillance, so after you've launched your product. So if we just look at market first of all, the basic question is really, is there a market for my product? And research can do that, and it doesn't always have to be expensive research. This can be really as simple as looking at how many patients are there with this condition in the UK. It might be how many patients change the product they use each year in the UK. How many of these surgical procedures take place? And that's a lot of that information is freely available if you know where to look, and so you can find that. So once you've worked out that actually the market is big enough, I do have a client that has a product that treats for a condition where only 200 people in the UK are diagnosed with it every year. So sometimes there is still a market for a tiny, when it's a tiny market, there's still an opportunity. But really what you want to know is you've got a decent opportunity there. Then you need to know, is my product right for this market? So have I actually got the right product and the right market, or have I got a good product that ought to be fitting a different market? And then within that, who are my key potential customers? Who am I going to target with this product? Am I going to be targeting, just the end user? If you're selling into the NHS, there's going to be a whole load of people involved in the purchasing decision. It's not just going to be the person who uses the product, the doctor, the nurse, the dentist, whatever. There'll be some other people in there, particularly including the people in charge of the purse strings. So you need to include all those people in your research and get their opinions. Then and also in that stage, I should really have added a fourth one on, which is really understanding who your competitors are. Are you trying to go into a marketplace where there are hundreds of competitors already? Because that will have an impact on the next bit, which is your product. So under product, you really want to look at talking to people about what do they think of your product? How can I improve my product or refine it, make it better, differentiate it? If you are in a busy marketplace, what is it that you have or could have that would make people want your product rather than one of the established products? Then there are also things like usability issues. Are there any usability issues you need to be thinking about addressing? And it may sound really stupid, but I've seen people trying to use a new asthma inhaler and not be able to work out how to take the cap off. Now that's pretty fundamental. So, those are things, and, it can be resolved by something as simple as putting a tiny little plastic lip on the back of the cap so it clicks off more easily. It's obvious where you unclip it. So you need to think about things like that. And then particularly if you're talking about a medical product used by a professional, do I need to be providing any training? I've seen this, and it's a key consideration in the surgical market, where if you've got a new instrument, you need to provide training. Now, that might be face-to-face training, hands-on training. It might be providing training videos, but it's something you need to know. You need to know what else has to go alongside your product to support your product when you launch it. So assuming that's all gone all right, you're going to launch it, you've sorted your product out, then you need to work out how you're going to communicate it to people. So what's the best means of getting to these people? Are these people who are going to respond better to a face-to-face sales call? Are they people who might respond to an email, an invitation to a seminar or a webinar? What's the best sort of media channel to get to them? And then within that, what are the key messages you need to be getting across? What are the key things that are going to make them sit up and take notice of your product and help them differentiate it from other people's products? And then moving on to price and barriers. Obviously, price is always a massive issue. But what is the price point? There are some very, very complex market research techniques you can use that, but there are also some really simple ones that can really help you at least just put your product in the market where it fits. You know, if you were putting your BMW in against, did you want to ask a question, Paddie?
It's just a point. One of the things that comes up about prices is who actually pays. Because sometimes you're targeting individual users and patients, and sometimes you're selling to the NHS. And it's a huge, I've seen so many things fall over on that.
Yeah, and that's why it's really important at the first stage when you're looking at market to work out who you actually need to be talking to. And you need to be talking to the payers. That, that could be a whole committee of people potentially, but you need to be talking to them all the way through and communicating with them, because they are the people who can just stop your product dead. So Paddie's quite right. And then there are other potential barriers to purchase. If there is a training requirement and everybody who's going to use this product requires a half-day training, well, even if you provide the training free, the employer still has to give up their staff for half a day. So there's a cost for them to bear for that. And they're going to be contemplating that when they're considering whether to adopt your product or not. So you really must think about that. And then the final stage I'm going to talk to here is post-marketing surveillance. Traditionally in medical products, this has been a really neglected area, and pretty much people have relied on just looking at product returns, product complaints. That's no longer good enough. The new medical device regulations stipulate that to obtain and retain your CE mark for your product, you must have and you must implement a post-marketing surveillance plan, and it must be proactive. So you can't just sit there waiting for complaints or comments to come back. You have to actively go out and ask people how they're getting on with your product, what they think of it, what issues they have, how you can improve it. It might not even be the product, it might be an issue with the packaging. It might be that, if it's a patient-focused product, it might be that the patient instruction leaflet isn't as comprehensible as it could be, and it's a bit confusing to people. So that's something where you can continue to improve your product after launch by doing those things. And as I say, it is now a requirement if you want to have a CE mark for your product, which of course you do. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I wanted to share with you a very brief case study, which is a case study I worked on with an organisation. So it was a kind of science health crossover collaboration project. And essentially, they developed a novel diagnostic test for, I'll just call it a life-threatening condition, because obviously it's confidential. But what it did was it enabled doctors to diagnose this condition at a stage where the disease is currently undetectable by current means. So that sounds fantastic. So you're going to know way earlier than you do. So the brief from them was really to go and determine, is there a market for this product? So we did a little bit of desk research to find out that, yes, it's a big issue. Lots of people diagnosed with this condition every year. And then we went out and did some primary research by telephone, qualitative interviews, so quite wide-ranging interviews with the medical specialists who were involved and the pathologists. And the reason for talking to both of them at that stage was obviously the pathologists are the ones who do the tests. So they obviously have the comments about the practicalities of the test and how you get samples and how you transport samples and how they process them. But they only do a test if a medical specialist orders it. So they're not in control of whether the tests happen. So we talked to medical specialists about that. The overall conclusion from both groups, but particularly from the medical specialists, was that this is really exciting science, but of absolutely no material value at all at the moment. They can't use it. And the problem being that they've developed a diagnostic, but there's no treatment to go along with it. So effectively, all you'd be doing is diagnosing it in patients and then saying to them, you've got this horrible condition, but I'm sorry, I can't help you. So you've left them in a position where they're just anxious and concerned, and you're offering them no hope of treatment. So the benefit of doing qualitative research is because it allows you to explore what people are talking about and the way they do things. It's a great way of getting people to come up with other ideas. And so the key thing that they came up with was that really my client needed really to partner with a company that was developing drugs in this area so that they could become a partner diagnostic to it. So there are drugs in development for earlier stages. And so they said, if you can become the partner diagnostic, then every time this is suspected, your test can be done. And if it's positive on your test, the pharmaceutical company's product will then be used because they're inextricably linked. So it's a kind of win-win for both organisations. So I think that's a nice example of where, you know, somebody's developed something really innovative, but they haven't really kind of worked out the whole process of how they commercialise it and get it to market. And this is just an example of how market research can help put you down the right road. So that's it from me. I'm happy to take any questions. I think you're on mute, Paddie.
No control of technology. I think we'll keep going because we're quite pressed for time. So the other player in this piece, so Karen has talked a lot about, you know, involving the users in terms of healthcare professionals and buyers. But actually the other piece of this jigsaw are the members of the public, not only patients, but carers and families and all the rest. So I'd like to invite Sue to talk to us a bit about what it's like to be a public contributor.
Thank you, Paddie. Hello, everybody. As Paddie says, sorry, can you hear me?
I'm going to stop sharing because now we can all see each other.
As I said, my name is Sue Bowick, and I'm currently a carer for my husband who has a lung disease. But I was also an ex-carer for my mother, and she lived with us for 6 years, the last 6 years of her life. And importantly, I'm a member of the Citizen Panel. I first became interested in health research when my father developed dementia. And as a family, we knew nothing about the disease and how devastating it was, and how it would affect our lives so dramatically, really. I joined the Alzheimer's Society as a research network volunteer, and I've been passionate about patient and public involvement for over 18 years. I think the patient voice is really important. In the early days of dementia research, researchers would ask us to review applications, and they would say they're going to do this and that. But we had to say, no, what you're suggesting wouldn't work. They obviously hadn't thought about the person. Somebody with dementia wouldn't understand. They won't remember the how and why they are supposed to be doing it. So I think you always have to remember the impact of the person and their carers and family. One example is, you know, you can send a reminder to someone with dementia on a mobile phone, perhaps an alarm on a mobile phone or something, to take their medication. In my father's case, it would be absolutely no use because he couldn't remember, and he wouldn't. I mean, he could answer a normal phone just about, but he'd forget as soon as he put the phone down. And it can also be dangerous. Sometimes people forget to take their tablets even though they've had a reminder, or they may take too many. So remember that one size doesn't fit all. It would work well for someone in the early stages of dementia. And my husband has an alarm on his mobile phone to take his tablets, to remind him to take his tablets. So you have to remember the people that you're taking your invention to, or your device to. Some people can't use a mobile phone even, and somebody with dementia certainly wouldn't be able to. But thinking about something that is a very easy help to a patient with dementia, it's going, I know it sounds strange, but it's just signage, and especially in public toilets. They'll tell you the way to get in, but there's no way to say the way out half the time. So this was really important in community places, and that has been taken up and used. You might have a brilliant idea, but it's always useful to speak to the patient. And I suggest that you get them on board from the beginning. It could well save you money in the long run. These people are experts in their disease or condition. They know what works and what doesn't. Perhaps organise a focus group and ask them what they think and what might help them, and be prepared to listen. If it's a device, will it be comfortable? Would they wear it? Can they understand the instructions? As Paddie said, is it available on the NHS? Or if not, can they afford it? Is there any maintenance? Does it require internet connection? Remember that not all people have this or can afford it. Another thing to think about, and what we as public lay people, is it value for money? It has to be a benefit to both the health service and the patient. This is really important. It might be a money-saving device, but if people can't use it or get on with it or afford it, it isn't much use. And remember that people are really very willing to help. We all want a better quality of life for patients and for our family and friends. So thank you very much. Thanks, Paddie.
Thanks ever so much, Sue. And I think what you brought home in that is how personal this is. The one thing I found in doing this piece of work with working with individual real life people, as I refer to them with my my colleagues at the WMAHSN, is that this is a very personal business, and to involve patients and users as experts by experience is an absolute essential, and that expertise is just as valid as that of the consultant or the technologist. So I have an interesting question here for people. There is, and I bet you've had this happen to you, Sue. You get asked about a product just before it goes to launch. Yes. So you're involved at the evaluation end of it rather than the beginning of it. So is it actually any use at all? So what I'd like to do is I make up an idea. So there are, and I'll use this one because there's a million of them out there. So I keep getting people coming to me with an idea for an app, because it's always an app, and there's a big question about how the digital divide. So an app to help people with diabetes monitor their condition. And this is going to be the old singing, old dancing thing, so they can put their results in and they can communicate with their consultant, and then they can be prompted when they're going to have an episode, and it's marvelous, and it's available on the App Store, and it's 50 quid subscription per year, and I'm going to sell it, and the NHS is going to buy it, and everyone's going to love it, and everyone's going to be well. So if this was this imaginary project, what do you think? Who do you think the communities are, and how would you get to them? Because that's the challenge here. It's relatively easy to talk to healthcare professionals, but how do we talk to users? How do we get to them?
Do you want me to go? Yeah. Okay. So it does generally require some investment, but not as much as you think. There are certain groups. If you're at a really early stage in this, I would say go to some expert groups. So there will be diabetes patient groups. Go to them. They're always on the lookout for things, and they're always delighted to engage. I'm sure Stu would agree with that. That you know, they're so happy to be asked, but do it at an early stage, because they're the people who are going to have the most experience. They've probably used the most other devices in the past, will give you the best answer. Once you've taken that input, what I call the expert patient input, obviously you incorporate that into your product. I would personally then take it along to a wider group of diabetics, and there are loads of companies in the UK who will recruit them. They have consumer panels, they have profiles of these people, so you can actually just get yourself a random sample, and they'll even set up interviews with them for you.
Yeah,
It's available as commercial. Go ahead, Sue.
No, I was going to say also a lot of hospitals now have their own PPI groups, you know, especially for specific diseases. So that's another way that you might get in touch with people.
We had a recent
GPs maybe, you know, I don't know.
We had a recent applicant to the SME Innovation Fund, and I'll not declare who they were for confidentiality reasons, but actually they'd done their homework very well, because they had a formal affiliation to the disease grouping, both in the UK and in the US. So they provided lots of work and talks and interactions with potential users of their technology. And they've been doing that for some time prior to launch. So actually they had a very good route into the marketplace, and a real understanding of how those users would use their technology, and had modified it as a result. Unsurprisingly, they were successful in their application to the SME Innovation Fund. So when you've got all these people, you've managed to find them, and actually finding them is, yes, you can find them through commercial services, and as Sue said, we can recruit them yourself, and it's something the AHSN is looking to do, is to try and support people to do that. When you've got them, what do you ask them, and how do you ask them that question? I'd love your perception of this, Sue, because I bet you've been asked some absolute humdingers of questions.
It's difficult, I think. I think a group of people, it's much better. You need somebody to start off, really, because after all, it's their medical condition. They may be embarrassed, and so it's always useful to think about what the end result is, and start off asking them about their disease and their condition, and if what you're suggesting might help, or get them to talk about general things, because it's really good. Amazing ideas come out of that. You need to get this two-way system going, really. So I think you need to just ask them if they think it would work, really. My daughter's a diabetic, as it happens, and I know the pitfalls, but she knows how to treat her condition. She knows what she wants, and what would help her. I think you need to, as I say, get this two-way thing going.
Martin,
they need to know they need to know if they can afford it, really, if it's going to help, and is it going to be unpleasant?
yeah.
All these things need to be taken into consideration.
Sorry. Martin, go ahead.
Just going to say, it's we're going through this process. Like, I work for Staffordshire County Council, and I work for Lichfield Specialist Day Opportunities. And we've got a project going at the moment with co-design with like parents and carers and stuff like that. So they're trying to bring that more into it. So what Sue's saying is really relevant to me at the moment, and what you're talking about is really relevant as well. And it's invaluable being able to speak to people and find out what they want from their service. And with that, it's now linking out where you've got commissioners coming in, and there's other sort of like parent and carer groups, and then you can branch out to prospective future customers and stuff like that. And it's gaining all this information, but you definitely need to get people involved, and and it's also building up those trust and getting that rapport with people, and you can approach them, and it's just there's so much information coming in, and it's a really great way to do it as well, because I think it stops things happening to people, which is historically what we've done, and that seems to be a key thing. Parent groups and customers think they're not being listened to, they're not really sort of being taken on board what they want, and like you're saying about products being created by companies but not really for people. And I think this is where we've got to start going, and we started to do that, and I've learned a lot through it, being part of that group, but also having the opportunity where we've got new sort of leads coming in that are looking at different approaches, and it's really working. And so everything Sue's saying makes sense, and some of the stuff you're saying links into what we're experiencing at the moment. So this is really relevant for me, really.
Delighted to hear that, because interesting, I had a conversation with a GP from Wolverhampton yesterday, and she has a particular interest in making sure that the voice of carers is heard. And it strikes me, and I fall over the language in this all the time, and I get beaten up by my equivalents of the other AHSNs almost every time I go to a meeting, because I get the language wrong. But you're not allowed to say hard to reach groups anymore. It's seldom heard. And one of the seldom heard voices are the voices of the carers and those around the patient. And particularly in these days of dementia or people with learning difficulties or whatever, I think we need to find more effective means of connecting with people who are not the individual being treated, because for whatever reason of their condition, that they're unable to articulate it in their own way. And this GP said, she will see 100 patients in a week, and actually she never even makes eye contact with the person who is there with the patient. So I think there's a really interesting question there about how we empower the carer voice as well as the patient voice. So it's why I sort of tend to move away from patient engagement as a topic. Go ahead, Martin.
It's a really interesting subject, because obviously during COVID at the moment, carers as well, there's a massive sort of like extra pressure on them as well, reduce services and things like that. We worked all the way through COVID, but we had to reduce services, and their well-being is so important because they play such a massive part in the people that they care for as well. So I mean, you saying that about GPs, it's really important, isn't it? Because they're like you say, they're forgotten people sometimes. They are trying to push forward like carers, assessments and things to make sure that their well-being's been taken care of. And I think it's really important, because sometimes, like you say, they're the ones that get forgotten, but they're a massive part of caring for people. It's not just the providers, it's the people at home. They can't switch off, can they? It's a 24-hour job. So, and we need to see how we can support them as well. And that's part of our role as well, I think. So I think it's great that you're saying that as well.
So, sorry. Oh, lots of hands. Excellent. Karen, go ahead. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was hovering over it and forgot to press the button. Going back to your question before about how do you ask the questions, Sue prompted me to think a really important thing when you've got a new service or a new device, whatever it is you're trying to develop. Particularly if you're going to go and talk to a group of people, but even if you're going to talk on an individual basis, ask them about what they do now and how they manage their condition now, and what device they use now, or what service they're using now, what issues do they have with it. Don't go in with your shiny new product and go, hey, look at this is great. Because I have seen people try to do that, and there's nothing that turns people off more, because they really feel that they're not being listened to. So you need to go and understand what are the issues, and actually you'll learn a lot about your own product from what they say before you even show them a description of your product, because you'll be kind of sitting there thinking, oh crikey, ours doesn't do that. Oh, yeah, we have the same problem with that on ours as well. And you will actually be already learning. And so some of the things, when they get their hands on your product, you'll realise, you know, they won't be a surprise to you. So don't just wade in with your shiny product or new service. Talk to them about what their issues are at the moment.
Joe?
Yeah, I think as said, it's, you know, really important that you do involve the public contributors at, you know, in particular it's an early stage. But I suppose just linking back to something that we spoke about on Tuesday, was having that ability to pivot your idea. So I think it's really important not, you know, to ask the questions that you're suggesting and putting forward now, but also to listen to that. But if it's not the answers that you want, it's not just a, yeah, this is a great, it'll work. It might be, or no, that won't work. And then having the ability to be able to change that and tweak it and actually use that information in a way that will, you know, further design the product. I think that's it's just as important to sort of listen to it and implement that as a change as it is to ask the questions. I suppose, I don't know what your thoughts were on that.
That's a very important one for me, because my big fear in attempting to do more citizen engagement is that you lapse into tokenism very easily. And I really do worry about that. Is that, you know, we had a patient panel and they said yes, so now I'm going to go off and do my product. And here's a question for this group here, is what is it that the AHSN should be doing to help you to do citizen engagement better? And I use citizen in its broader sense to include carers and users and whatever. Is there something you would like us to do? Because at the moment I'm developing a resource pack, a resource request to the AHSN to support this activity. So what's on your list? Anyone got a list? Anything I could do for you, Martin?
Not that I can think of at the moment. No, I'm just processing a lot of what's been said. This is quite new to me because obviously, like I said, I work in adult social care, so we've been invisible in the market for so long. We're just starting to sort of like catch up with the rest of the world, really. To be honest, using digital, we've been so far behind for so long. You know, we've literally this year we've got smartphones and laptops, but that's something that's, you know, not happened for a long time.
New to the service, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, we're using Teams and things like that and stuff like that, you know, because of COVID, but it's all sort of like very new to us. So this kind of thing, we've never been allowed to publicize ourselves as such before. So it's all very new to us. So for me, this is definitely, I'm dipping my toe in a very different kind of waters at the moment, but I'm always open to be challenged and to be open to new things. And this is why I'm here today, to learn, you know, that's the point.
And there may be a useful connection here with Amelia, who comes from a, you know, a big university hospital with lots of tertiary services, who actually they're investing a lot in digital, and there may be things that you can learn from their experiences in trying to embed it at UHCW that to help you circumnavigate some of the pitfalls.
I've written her name down already, and I've got my service lead, Kelly Gray, who's the one that put me on this. So I literally link in with her teams afterwards. I'll give her an overview of what we've talked about today, and she's the sort of person that I'll go back to as my point of call, because she's the one that, you know, would make those kind of links. I'm here to sort of like absorb it, you know, process it, see how it's going to fit with our service, and then I'll go back to her. That's what I usually do. So yeah.
Marvelous.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I'm conscious I've been told that everyone has to have a comfort break before the next session kicks in, and you've got 4 minutes, bless you. So what I'll say is thank you everyone for joining in. Sue, thank you so much for your perspective. It's always really good to have a real life person in the room, and I'm getting to the stage where I don't seem to be able to do anything without Sue beside me. Karen, thank you ever so much for your insights into market research. Karen's got a little sort of the golden rules, which is a really helpful document which we'll circulate to everyone who's on the call, which is really, really helpful. Thank you ever so much for your time. Please get in touch if there's anything you'd like to talk about. It was very much a whistle-stop tour just to get the conversation started. And thank you ever so much, everyone, for taking part.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Yeah, fascinating session, really thought-provoking, and, you know, really important as part of that, you know, innovation pipeline as well. I think it's something that we need to integrate into that. So thank you very much.